My name is Joyce Raimondo. I am the Education Coordinator at the Pollock-Krasner House and Study Center in East Hampton. As most of you know, we are a national landmark. We're located about 100 miles east of New York City on Long Island. We're the home of the foremost abstract expressionist artists Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner. And today, of course, I'm hosting this from my home. I'm hosting it remotely. Today, we have a special guest artist, Pearl Rosen Golden. And Pearl's work really spans from working from observation, keenly observing nature, especially the flow of water at the seaside. And recently, Pearl has turned to abstraction, and she's going to present her work and explain this. So it actually relates really well to Pollock and Krasner. And in many of our talks, we talk about different approaches to nature, right? Where you could paint from observation what you see, or you could go within and paint from your imagination. Or you can paint really in the moment, seeing what the material is doing and literally letting it flow. So we're going to see how Pearl approaches this. Now, a little bit about our guest artist, and then Pearl will say hello. Pearl Rosen Golden is known for her landscapes that are filled with light and texture and created in various mediums. Her work is inspired by the natural occurrences near her homes in Long Beach, New York, and Seattle, Washington. Her accomplishments include numerous solo shows, recently in 2025 with Prince Street Gallery in Manhattan, where she has been represented, a member of that gallery for many, many years. And her works are in collections in 2 museums. You could find her work on Fluid Media, on the Shim Art Network, on Artsy, and in the New York Artist Circle website. And Pearl will also tell us her direct website at the end of the talk. I'll just give you a little description of her work, and then she'll, of course, show. Landscape painting in plein air and in the studio, this is what Pearl says, is at the heart of my practice for many years. I seek to understand and depict the unique qualities and complexity of the natural world using a range of painting mediums. My recent work, creating in both, as I said, in realistic and abstract genres, follows the journey of water, its movement, transformation, and presence in the environment. Water is fundamental and essential to life, and yet it's its own entity. So let's give Pearl a big welcome.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is so exciting to be here. And I want to thank you, Joyce, so much for having me here. It really is an honor to be at affiliated doing this with the Pollock-Krasner House. Um, so I also you brought up about Jackson Pollock and people um, that work in similar styles. Well, I'm kind of new to this more flowing kind of thing, but one thing I really have come to appreciate is his desire for the flow. And that's an interesting concept that I am feeling as well. And also, he's very innovative. He had to develop a way to work. And I find that is sort of what's happening for me as well. So he's especially important to me right now. Oh, okay, let's get
Big Zoom,
started here.
believe me, this presentation is worth it. This woman is amazing. Okay, go ahead, Pearl. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've kind of all did the motivation and everything. I'm just going to jump to the first slide. So this is a slide that should be familiar to the people that live out by the Pollock-Krasner house. This is that neighborhood. This is Lazy Point in the Springs. And I did this in 2002. And for many years, I just painted in plein air with oil paint. And and so that process of painting that way for so many years really provided a basis for me going forward. and it has influenced all my art that created in the studio with photo reference, with memory and imagination. And if I didn't have this basis of so many years painting outside, I would not be where I am today, even when I'm doing abstract work. So I just wanted to start with who I am, and I still do paint in plein air. I find that it is like one of the best ways to create art. It brings you in touch with the world around you in a way that other activities just can't. It's just a wonderful activity that has just really meant a lot to me my whole life. So let's move on to the next screen. So, as Joyce mentioned, I have two homes, and this journey is really about these two homes. I grew up in Brooklyn and painted in Brooklyn quite a bit and painted in other parts of the world. I painted in Scotland and in upstate New York and out in the East End and in New Mexico. But when you live near what you want to paint, it's a different experience. So I live in Long Beach, New York, and that's where I am right now. And I also live in Seattle, Washington, and I've lived in these two places now for 21 years. But so I want to talk first about my experience in Long Beach. You know, living in a place where you can walk down the block and there's the ocean, it's a different way of making that the center of your art. It's seeing it daily, it's seeing it in every kind of situation. And when I first moved out here to be with my husband, I was absolutely blown away by the expanse of the beach and the horizon line, the various tones and colors that existed on the beach. And at that point, I was working with Shayla Golobratko in her studio, and I did this series of prints. And and these really were me trying to say, wow, look at this expanse. So that was the work I did in 2007 here. Then I kind of also started doing work that was more typical, and I was especially interested in showing the uniqueness of the beach landscape and the sense of drama and situations that you really don't find so much in other places. I've been very attracted to painting the snow on the beach, and in cold wind, I was really trying to get the feeling of that sharpness of the wind with the sharp edges in the painting. And the on the right, cloud reflection with jetty is, this is something that happens almost on a regular basis where you will have a pool of seawater that didn't quite go back to the beach, and that it will be like a mirror reflecting everything. And it's just an amazing feeling to be in that situation and see that amount of space being reflected above and below. It's just remarkable. So over time, I moved to smaller and more specific events to paint. And these two pieces are created in gouache. That became my main medium, and I really love the gouache because it has elements of oil paint. It's opaque, it has rich color, and you really are able to control it. These two pieces were made during the pandemic. And if you look at the titles, Waiting for the Next Wave, if you remember, that always talking about the next wave of infection. And also during that time, there were many protests. And so the one on the left, Determination Against Power, that piece is really about this confrontation that happens on a regular basis of the ocean hitting into the rocks. or into the jetty. And it's a constant power thing. And you see how the rocks slowly over time are transformed by the ocean doing that. It's a very interesting thing to see how they are slowly molded into different forms. Um, I also became, and this was another gouache piece from that time period. I became more interested in just how water moves. And this was a real challenge to create this little piece. It took several tries of experiments to figure out just how to make the sea foam feel like it's moving. And I wound up with a combination of brush and also letting the water help me create the shapes and then put paint into it. And that technique became something very important that I will be talking about some more. So I want to take you to the beach now. So the beach is extremely difficult to paint, the ocean and the beach, I should say, because everything is really always in motion. And so many things are in motion at the same time that you need help with that. Um, and the ocean everything changes. I mean, the sand moves an incredible amount. And then you have the changes that happen on the jetties, that they change in color from day to day and season to season, and they change dramatically so that in the winter there's a layer of black ice on them, and the jetties themselves turn completely black. It's really quite astonishing. And you have the contrast in the warmer weather when the seaweed is glowing on the rocks and it turns brilliant green. So these are huge contrasts. So I also still had the problem of figuring out how things work. So what I did is I started using videos to record and see what's happening. So this is just one segment. I'm going to do this. Stop it. Oh, and it worked. How about that? So I want to line up what's happening here. So you have these waves that will slowly start coming in. You have this region. Oh, do you see my pointer? Oh, yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, I'm assuming you see my
Yes,
pointer.
we see the pointer.
Okay, great. So you see how the waves start back there and then they start to form. And over here, this whole little churning thing, this is the sea foam being created. And then let's move a little bit. And you start to see the sea foam coming and it will create, look at the beautiful patterns that happen as a result of that churning. And that is really exciting to me because I really do love painting the sea foam. Okay, now there's some other things that that I'm observing is the way the waves are lining up and the way the sea foam is lining up. And now you also have the wave hitting the rock. Okay, and watch what happens to that. Okay, and this is where I'm stopping. So this is a special point in this video because this is my research for my painting, The Green Jetty. And so what I wanted in Green Jetty is I wanted this layering of waves, one, two, and three. I wanted this wonderful spiral form from the sea foam. I wanted this particular shape of the sea foam that defines this wave. I wanted these wonderful shapes that are lying on top of the water. And I especially wanted this circle shape. And I've been fascinated by the circle shapes in the water. And they come from hitting rocks and they also come from dips in the sand. And I also I'm studying the textures and growth on the jetty as well. So let's go see Green Jetty. And so here's the painting that I studied with doing that. And you can see going from one to another that I've taken liberties with the piece in terms of it's not exactly what you just saw, but it has the feeling of it. And that's what's important to me. Um, and from this point on, I also became much more interested in what was growing on the jetties. And I want to show you a piece from 4 years later in 2024. And so now this is a close-up of a ridge that's on the jetty. And one part of the ridge has the seaweed, and the other part has, metallic colors of the rock. It has more seaweed, it has bits of water, it has just a lot of variation. And so this is something that I'm trying to depict going forward. So this is one of the areas that, in the future there will be more paintings like this. And let's take a look back at some other paintings where I used video. This is the wave rises, and this one is kind of unique for me. The top portion of the ocean about to slam into this jetty is created in watercolor, and the rocks are created in gouache. So the watercolor gives you a little bit more of the transparency and kind of lightness of the wave and the whole scene, whereas the gouache, which is opaque and thick, I practically carve this with the gouache, and so I think that that I was looking for what medium would best describe the character of these two different forms, the water and the rock. This piece here is takes another view of water. This is when the ocean comes up the beach and far enough that it catches um, those parts of the jetty that are kind of like paving stones. And so, as fast as the ocean comes in, it goes back and retreats just as quickly. It's a really remarkable thing to watch water retreat. So that was the moment that I caught here. And I did take some liberties in making this maybe a little bit more abstract and a little bit more modern. I had some fun with the reflection of the sky on the rocks, and I enjoyed this area here because it really does feel like wet sand. So whenever I'm painting, I'm always trying to be earnest about how I feel about what I'm looking at, and try to represent that in the best way. So now I am going to switch to Seattle. And in Seattle, there was a whole other kind of exploration, and it especially focused on trees. And if you've been to the Pacific Northwest, um, it is just an incredibly lush place, and the variety of types of trees they have is just startling. And it's still a very an environment that is inspiring and making me full of awe in terms of of our Earth. So this piece was done in 2012, and it was created with walnut ink, which is one of my favorite mediums. And I was doing a lot of drawing outside with walnut ink at that time as well. But this particular spot is right next to a path, so there was nowhere for me to stand. So I did this in the studio, and I did it so that I was experimenting with using water and spray because the walnut ink does not have a binder. If you use too much water on it, it literally will just wash away. Um, so I had some fun with that. Let's go. I want to show you some other trees that I've done some interesting things with. Each one of these are on Yupo paper. And the piece on the left, twins, that's pretty typical of the trees that were in my neighborhood. And I used to go around with my pad and draw in the streets, and use my Chinese brush pen. So this piece I created in the studio from one of the drawings. I just transferred it over and did a pretty good depiction. Um, the one in the middle here is also created on Yupo paper, but it's created on translucent Yupo paper, which gives you some fun things you can do. The bottom of this piece and the background of this tree, except for the other tree over here, they're all created on the back of the paper. So I painted on the front and the back. And you get that layering of the translucent quality adds a sense of depth and also changes the tonality to be a little lighter. So I did a whole series of these tree portraits, and I'm going to continue to do those, although I don't know if I'm going to use Yupo paper. This last one, wet, is really about the Pacific Northwest. It's about the heaviness of trees when it's filled with water. It's about the kind of quality to the air, the mist in the air, this gentle fog, and the whole feeling of being in the Pacific Northwest, which has its own beauty. And this piece was also created, I think there may be three layers on this one. So you have the front, the back, and then this piece back here is a separate paint, is a separate drawing. So you could really have some fun with this stuff. It's just difficult to frame. So in my exploration of, how to make these trees even more special than they are, I started using iridescent ink, which I never thought I would ever be using anything iridescent in my life. Turns out I love it. So here's a little bit about this piece. Whoops, keep it going. And here you can see this is the effects of the iridescent ink on this tree. And this inner glow just kind of happens when you move when the painting is put in the correct light. In this case, I am physically moving it around with my hand. And so you have several different colors of iridescence here. You have this copper, you have a blue, and this mixture of the copper and the blue, and there's also gold. So let's show you the gold. And it's just so much fun. And the iridescent paint itself is a very good quality paint. And it's interesting how you don't really notice it in this piece here. This is how it typically looks when I look at it in the frame. Let's look at these two pieces. So here, these two are made with the same exact materials, and they both have iridescent ink. This piece was created in the studio. The forest transformed. It has a lot more water in it. And it made for this really wonderful poetic quality. But you can also make out how interesting the iridescent quality is. And I also used back here, this is also a iridescent yellow. So they're just such interesting pieces with the iridescent. Now, the botanical path piece, I actually painted that on location, but I finished it in the studio. And this one also, you can make out some of the iridescent color, and it sort of helps it pop. And I had a lot of fun creating the textures down here. And the piece kind of moves towards realism, but it sort of stops. It sort of talks about other things, about the color and the shapes and the contrasting colors. Um, so I really enjoyed that. So let me move on. So as things progressed, I got more into the flow of the ink being a bigger part of the process. And in this first piece here, and I think this is when I was beginning to use the acrylic ink as opposed to the Bombay ink. And as you can see, when I paint, I tend to allow the paint to go beyond the paper, and that's good for the energy of the piece to not feel you have to stop. At this point, at the beginning, I didn't know what I was going to make, what it was going to be. So because it's acrylic, I could let it dry and come back to it and not lose any of the first layer. The next time I worked, I just was very loose, and all of a sudden, these forms happened from the mixture of the ink and the water, and this whole scene just started appearing of this inventive flower. Um, and so this is how it dried the second time I went to paint on it. And the third time I decided it needed more. And I actually used some brushwork. And it's really kind of startling when you put the brush on and it's not flowing quite the way the rest of the paint is. It's and it's like in one way, it's like, gee, I really want it like that, but I also want the feel of the brush. So I decided to make this dark piece here. I just kind of felt it needed something. And then I worked on some other areas. So I'm going to show you my studio a bit now because I bet you're all curious about, well, what I'm using. So I have these little bottles of ink. I have in acrylic ink, Bombay ink, iridescent ink, walnut ink, sumi ink, and I even have some bottles that are acrylic gouache, but I haven't used them for in the things that I'm showing you. Um, over here, let's start over here on the right side. So I work on panel. These are paper glued to cradle board, and I also use on the sheet on the back on the other side. You can see I work also on just loose paper that's not mounted to anything. I use this as like the little thing you can use to blow paint. It shoots air out. I don't really use that much anymore. It makes this mark. If you look at the painting on the left, you see these kind of jaggedy edges that if you blow on it, it makes those edges. It forces a like a branch. It forces, that kind of thing to happen. Um, these are how I pretty much paint these little jars. These little, it's like a little bottle that has a plastic top and a metal nozzle. And this little loop is you stick that on top of the metal nozzle to keep it fresh. I have a gazillion of these bottles now. And they are all labeled. And I also create. I put this. The obvious is I put the ink in there, and I also put mixtures of ink in there so I can vary color. But it's hard to see the color from the outside. So I do need to mark it, and I also create like a gazillion charts, so I know what color I'm actually picking when I pick it. So the inks tend to dry fast, especially if you are using it in like a little bowl like this to mix colors. Um, And so that it sort of limits you. Adding the water does give you a little bit more time, but it's in, I have to be innovative with this, to figure out how to do this. And then I also use syringes like this one and the pipette, and I also use syringes that look like what kind you get in the doctor when you get a shot. Um, so these are kind of a pain in the neck to use too, because the ink will dry in the nozzle and you're about to use it and it's not coming out. And I have to use a very, very thin needle to go through that to open it up. So it's like the whole system is really kind of problematic, but you have to really love it to go through all this. And I do love it. So here is that piece finished. That's that. Let me go back so you can see which one it is. This piece, um, here it is finished. And these two were kind of pieces that moved me to a next level. Even though they were small, these pieces, I was not interested in making something. I was interested in the flow of the water. And and especially this abstract flow one, that was like, I looked at that, I'm like, this is cool. I could do this. And so kind of this is where a new beginning started. But something else happened besides this. One night I was painting and I was going to try to do an overall piece, and I was starting with just water. And the water kept coming. I had it spread all out, and the water just wanted to keep coming together. And so it would form a big puddle in the middle. And I'm like, I don't want this. And I would kind of push it out again. And that happened several times. And then I said out loud, the water just wants to be together. And then as I said that, in my mind, I am suddenly imagining, rivers and lakes and oceans and waterfalls. And I'm like, oh my God, that all wants to be together. And it was like, I realized this is how the world is formed, is it's the water wants to come together and flow. That magnetism exists, and that's what that's how we're all living. So after that, it really became much more of a partnership. Yeah, want to share this with you in terms of how I'm working now, where um, I just love these puddles that happen when you are first painting, and they are just so luscious. And you kind of hope they're going to dry as well as they look when they're wet. That doesn't always happen. Um, but I told Joyce asked me if I would do a demonstration, and I said, you know what, Joyce? It's really kind of become very meditative for me because I will just stand there and I will watch the water, the ink dry. And before I do anything else, I will just watch this drying process, watch how it's drying. Sometimes there's too much water and some water needs to come off. But it's like it's a whole other type of fluidity for me now. And that type of fluidity produced these two pieces. And my friend asked me the other day, did you make the paper wet first? And I was like, you know what? I don't remember. So I know I have to start writing down how I do things because literally every time I do this, I will take a different approach to how I handle water, how I handle paper, how I handle the ink. And it makes, for interesting types of paintings just because I'm willing to not go by a particular system, but by going by pushing it. And these next two I want to show you, um, these are in a class by themselves. So one of the things that I learned is not only does the water have intent in being together, but the water has its own signature in terms of drawing. And in these two pieces, literally, I started them off and then I just needed to watch. And all these wonderful fractal things showed up over here in the way of the water. This was the first one of these two. And over here, you have all these smaller patterns that are hard to make out, even for me, in this slide. And this is what happens when the the acrylic breaks down. And any acrylic, you give it too much water, it's going to break down. And this is really the signature of the water. And then I did this one, and it was like the water said to me, "Listen, Pearl, you just sit back and you watch. I'm going to have a show for you." And all this stuff just blossomed, and it was just freaking incredible. So, how do I know this, that this is the signature of water? Because this is what I found outside my house. This was on the corner of my house after a rainstorm. There had a heavy rainstorm, and this was a corner. Um, and the mud dried, and this is how the mud dried. And can you see the little tree-like forms, the branches that are all over? Um, this area is this area over here. I mean, this could be like an X-ray of some part of our body. It's how this is the signature of water. And then I walked over to the beach and I found this. And this was all from that heavy rain that created these drawings. So these tree-like forms, and this was all over this whole section of the beach. The water rushes in, and because it was a storm, water, it pulled back the sand, and in the action of pulling the sand, it created these tree-like forms, and it's just remarkable. So when I think about myself and working with the natural tendencies of the water, this is what I know it can do. So that's kind of the end, except for one, well, actually two more slides. And this is this tree that I've drawn and painted many times in Seattle, and it grows completely horizontal. It's the most amazing tree I've ever seen. And when I look at this tree, I see the path of water is that the energy of water formed this tree, and and I cannot now paint it the way I once did because of what I know now. And the green that's on here is moss, and it comes because of the damp weather, and it's absolutely glorious. It's all over the place. And that also produces the moisture, produces the growth. So I just wanted to leave you with this last slide. And if you want to see any of my artwork, you can go to my website. All the work that was in the Path of Water, or most of it, is on my website, www.pearlrosengolden.com. The newer pieces that I'm showing you have not yet been put on my website, but an easy way to find me on Artsy is just go to Google Pearl Rosen Golden on Artsy, and you will find the two Artsy sites that I'm with. One is Fluid Media on the Shim network, and the other one is the Prince Street Gallery artsy web site as well. And if you'd like to reach me, that's my email address, pearlrg@icloud.com. And I thank you so much.
I'm going to be the first to give you the accolades because I am such a big fan. You know, you really helped me actually to see water differently. Um, and to really, the idea of actually slowing down.
Mhm.
And because your observation is of the natural world is so intricate and the way you study nature, it's inspiring. Like I'm not like that. I just I walk through the beach and I might not even notice so many of the things that you mentioned. But then also you said you took liberties. So I think you're a really great example of creativity.
Mm. Oh, thank you,
You're
Joyce.
using your observations and your skill, but then stepping, I think, out of your comfort zone and what you know you've already done. And you said, I didn't know what I was going to make. And you were willing to take that chance. But what's interesting is you said all of a sudden forms happened, they appeared. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because Lee Krasner had a similar quote where she says, when it happens, it's
Mhm.
miraculous.
It is. It
Word
is.
happens almost suggests that we're not completely in control. It's almost like you have a
Mhm.
relationship with the water and the paint.
Yeah, there was a study they did recently where scientific study. So they looked at water under a microscope, right? And and there was like two microscopes of water. One, people gave the water compliments, and the patterns on the water were beautiful. Another microscope, they uh, they were yelling horrible things at the water, and the water patterns completely fell apart. There was
Mhm.
no more beauty to it.
Yeah.
So,
That,
this is other energy. So it wasn't that it heard what it was saying, it felt our energy. It
Mhm.
had to have felt the energy for it to change. Then, there's this whole other world that sometimes we can tap into that is about energy.
So
Oh,
one person says, I think Chinese ink and Chinese watercolors can give rise to the effect that Pearl described when poured, especially the mountain landscape paintings. Um, good connection. I don't know
yes,
if you're familiar with
using
Chinese. Yeah, go ahead.
I love using sumi ink. I've used I love ink, and this has gone on for many, many years. And I actually would do ink drawings and paintings with black sumi ink as a first layer for a painting sometimes because of the flow and also because of the dramatic design you could have of the black. It just really kind of gives you a good form for moving forward.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I love Chinese materials, and I love looking at Chinese brush paintings and the innovative things that people have been doing with that.
Mhm. Cindy Cat says, did you use a palette knife on the jetty paintings or on wave rises and other paintings in that series when you used
No,
touch?
no, no, I used a brush.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And another question, she says, in later ink abstracts, did you move the papers or just let the water flow on it? Did you pick it? Did you move it? Good question.
That is a good question. And I usually don't. As a matter of fact, I am meticulous in trying to just get the table to be flat. I'm like measuring with the things with the little bubbles. And so that you can like get it flat. And then once I get that flatness, I don't want to touch anything, because I want the water to do what it's going to do. Some people do. They lift up the paint and they move it this way and that way. I don't need to do that. I want the water to just make the shapes it's going to make and um and enjoy that in this part of this process. And I think going forward, my friend Tracy Luckner's here. We went and we saw Joan Mitchell's show in Manhattan. And I love that show of her abstract paintings. And I love the colors she was using. And I said to her, so what's the difference between what I'm doing and what she's doing? She has her own intent. So I am giving up some of my intent to allow the water to do its thing. But at some point, I am going to need my own intent to become more part of this because I think that's really where the future of this is. Um, and I still will let the paint, make pretty pictures for me and tell me, look what I can do. But I think I also need to have more intent. So that's going to be an interesting process going forward.
Mhm. Good, good point.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Pearl?
Um, Pearl, thank you so much. That was inspirational.
Awesome.
I I'm on the particularly the Long Island views. I'm on the opposite side of the Atlantic, so I have the other side to look at, but it looks remarkably the same.
Mm.
So that was quite fascinating. And I loved I'm getting a bit into flow myself because I'm very sort of uptight with my work. I get very exacting, and so I'm trying to build that flow and that relaxation into it. So thank you
Mm.
very much.
Mhm.
Oh, my pleasure. I spent some time in Scotland painting there. And just so you know, I love your side also.
I I love the use of blue and green in your artwork.
Ah,
Absolutely love it, especially cobalt blue and um, the way you do the skies and the clouds are my favorite
mm,
with your use of blue. I'm attracted to the sky lately, and I love trees,
mm,
and I love how you use the walnut ink
mm,
to create that. I love trees and sky. And also I've been doing a study on how artists have depicted the water in painting.
mm.
So I'm doing my own study on the skies and water.
Very good, Karen. Very good. Very
Yeah, I
good
want
follow-up to this because obviously
Yeah.
it's a subject, since I mean in art all over the world.
Yeah. So I also wanted to mention if you want to put yourself on my on a list to get my newsletter, I'd be happy to email it to you. So you can do that through my website, www.pearlrosengolden.com. My husband has been, um, he has really influenced my art in terms of nature a lot. He is somebody who loves to grow plants and vegetables, and he's just very keenly aware of the process in nature. And when we go walking in Seattle, it's he just opens my eyes, and then I really feel that lots of this new work that's happening is partly he's partly responsible for that, for inspiring me to look at nature in a much closer way.
I would like to say thank you again to Pearl for not only Pearl, the art itself, it speaks for itself, but the way you put together the presentation was extremely thoughtful and thorough and really, really beautiful. And if anybody would like to view it again, it will be posted on my YouTube channel, which
Oh,
you could
awesome.
Google Joyce Raimondo YouTube. And I have about over 100 different presentations that have been hosted on behalf of the Pollock-Krasner House and Study Center. So you can always look at it again and you can
Awesome.
share it with other people.
Great, great.
The beauty of this was it gave us another way of looking at things and another way of presenting our work. And I appreciated that. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Joyce, it's Karen. I just want to say very quickly that I feel like Pearl is using a magnifier to, it's like your paintings are how things would look if you look through it with a magnifier.
Interesting.
You know, that's such a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like it's an enlargement of something that has been magnified. That's just my impression.
Yeah. It's like also a macrocosm and a microcosm, and those
Yeah,
fluid water paintings are like unreal, Pearl.
it is. It's like looking through a
They're,
microscope.
they're incredibly exciting to do. They just really are.